Good morning, and welcome to the March version of Beyond the Pail. I'm Mike Berry, Executive Director for WASPO, and of course, my job is just to do a little intro here and then get out of the way. I want to introduce Jeremiah Johnson from Muskego and Joe Ladvina from La Crosse, our two expert panelists this morning. And so happy Thursday, guys. God, we're
Good
almost halfway
morning.
through
Good morning.
March. I'm going to go ahead and say it. There's no way it's going to snow again. I'm calling it right now. There's no way it's going to snow anymore. We're out of it. We're done.
Well, Mike,
Uh,
it's got to snow once the state tournaments start every year, right? We have a
right.
snowstorm.
The tournament is cursed.
Yep.
Well, hey, facility use is our topic this morning.
Yes.
My favorite.
Yeah.
All
Yeah. As we
right.
get started, too, as Caitlin noted, drop anything in the chat as we start conversating on some of these heavier topics. We'd be interested to hear what everybody's doing. We know that every district can vary in how they're processing their facilities use. And yeah, Joe and I were talking before everybody hopped on. I think he's projecting 19 inches of snow, and we're projecting like an inch of ice. And we just had 70 degrees down here in Muskego on Monday. So, Wisconsin, you're drunk.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Well, I
Let's
thought
hope
we'd,
that doesn't happen.
yeah, exactly. It'll impact facility use for sure this weekend. They'll still be trying to get in with 19 inches of snow on the ground.
Yes, they will.
I
Yes, they
think
will.
doesn't every facility director have at least one really good facility use story?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So as we
Yes.
dive in, I thought we would just chat about philosophy because a lot of us manage this a little bit differently and thinking
Mm.
about having a board policy that kind of governs when people are renting your facility, what that looks like. And some districts might be so small that they don't have a policy. It's a little bit more organic. And depending on what your expectations are, kind of guides how you process this. Joe, how do you guys establish what you're doing for your facility use program?
Yeah, we have a facility use policy that we implement for the general public to be able to use our facilities, and really our board expectation has been, along with our superintendent, has been that these are the community buildings. They're the ones who own them. They're the ones who pay for them, and what we've been given is we're stewards of those buildings, and so how we maintain them and how they're used, and so we work very closely with all of our building use and that really flows through our department. So we work very closely to reach that. I think our philosophy has always been if they're using our facilities, they understand the importance of them. And so hopefully when we go to referendum in return, they've been inside our buildings and know what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Similarly, here's my story, Mike. Way back when I was supervising a middle school and we were hosting a facility group, a basketball club, and the custodians didn't appreciate that people would bang on windows and doors at night trying to get in past the time that they were supposed to arrive. So the custodian went to the doorway. The people were minutes late, and rather than opening the doorway, he held up his watch like this and went like this, like, nope, can't get in. And then he walked away. Well, little did he know one of the people at the doorway was the vice president of our school board. So he just,
Oh,
Oh,
yes, yes, he was the president of the club. And so that went over like a fart in the wind. Um, so yes, we have to be cognizant of the community using our facilities. I feel like each one of our school board members, is somehow tied to one of the clubs that's happening in our municipality. One thing that's unique is we don't in Muskego have a park and rec program that's leading where we're at. We used to allow Park and Rec to kind of have first dibs at our facilities. And what they would do is they would block off absolutely everything. And they wouldn't even come for some of those times that they had blocked off. So we've now gotten to kind of a level playing field. And we'll talk about like how to establish that in a little bit, but making sure there's equity among all the folks that are clamoring to get into our facilities.
yeah, that's really a challenge for I think for everybody out there, right? Who's ever the first to have access over over scheduling, and so you limit the use for others. So yeah, we've seen that challenge as well.
right.
There was a question, an operational question. Why not jump into it? But when you do have snow on the weekends, do you cancel activities or do you pay for an extra plow to come through so you can make sure they're taken care of? Do you wait till it stops snowing?
Yeah, yeah, great question. One of the things we'll do is we'll already start talking to our staff who do, we have a combination. So some of them in contract, but we do some of it. And so we'll start the conversation here tomorrow and say, where are our activities at and what are their parameters? And so start thinking about, is there cancellations if we get to this point? And then if there aren't, this is when we're going to have building use. And so we plow around that. So we cover that schedule at the end of every week when we expect snow to fall on the weekend because we try to have the events go on. So we pay to have that done.
Nice. I guess
Yeah,
thinking through, go
sometimes
ahead,
you
Nick.
don't know. Sometimes you don't know what you're canceling, right? It might be
Right.
their little club championship game or something, and you don't know.
Exactly. And so we're in communication with them along that way and then and talking to our plowers to make sure that they know exactly what time people will be arriving so that we can have it safely plowed before they get there.
Yeah.
Getting into who does what, I think every district might be a little bit different, but when it comes to facility use in your district, do you have an internal rec department that's managing the whole scope? Are you doing it? Is it your school secretaries? How's that work for you?
Yeah, so we use Arbiter, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later on as our facility scheduler. And so the process is we oversee all of that in facilities. So my administrative assistant and I kind of monitor that, but we have approval at each school. And so we prefer at the elementary schools to be the custodians because that really helps the building engineers there. That allows them to know what's being scheduled in their building, what we can staff, when it's occurring. So it helps with that process. At the high schools where we have athletic directors and middle schools where we have athletic directors, they're the approval process. And so it's kind of a two-step process. They approve it first and then it comes to our department.
Very similar. We're actually just kind of got to where you're at. And what we found is we had like way too many cooks in the kitchen. Prior
Mhm.
to it was like school secretaries kind of scheduling their own things and um, co-curriculars, and then everything was in different areas. So getting it in one streamlined process is something I love that you're doing that, and we're glad to kind of finally be there ourselves.
Let me ask you this, if I could, Jeremiah. What about who approves or allows organizations to schedule events at your school?
Yeah. We just got to this point about a year and a half ago. I've met Van Zeelen, who works at one of our elementary schools. He has taken on that part of the process, so he's a facility leader. And so he will get the very first inquiry for a group to come into the buildings. He ensures that we have insurance set up, that they realize what kind of fees that they're going to incur, and we'll call them if they need to talk through things further. And so he will approve them to use the facilities. Then after that is where it gets a little bit more dicey because now you're putting another club in the mix or another group that's going to need their lion's share of the facilities.
Yeah,
How
that's a
about
good.
you?
Yeah, so we do that in our office. So it goes through our administrative assistant and I approve who goes through there. We collect the insurance, make sure that we have proof of insurance and so and then we cover what those costs would be. And so we do that out of our office. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of folks listening to us that might have a rec department inside their
Yeah.
facilities that's maybe handling all of this. So I think all of us probably are doing some things a little differently.
Yeah.
I think one of the key things is if you're not set up for any of this and you're wondering, what are we even talking about or where do we go from here? It's important to kind of set up your group structures for how somebody would be given permission to use your facilities. So you think about you have your internal school groups and co-curriculars. They should definitely have first stab at the facilities calendar to be able to block off things for all of the school needs. And I think it's important that you have a process for secretaries at the schools to start to get things in early as possible so that your calendar isn't blank and people assume that it's open to rent because that starts to create conflicts. We always have school board meetings or we'll block out the building, and that usually ruffles some feathers because why can't, they have their basketball games or practices at night. So getting all that stuff in early, so then you present the calendar to the groups. I think also important is to try to figure out how do your local clubs and park and rec and YMCA type things. Caitlin, we were talking about this earlier. How do they all factor into what level do they fall into? Are there differences because it's a city group that's like taxpayer kind of versus like a club? These are all important things that you got to dissect. And what we decided in Muskego is we have internal groups, local clubs and park and rec all fall into the same thing, and then outside groups and for profit. So really, we used to have like five or six, and now we've got it down to three, and that's kind of helped even the playing field for conversations about who gets what. How do you treat all these different type of groups?
Yeah, very similar. In fact, we'll be asking and we'll be going to our principals here in the next month and ask them to start putting on the calendar for next school year,
Mhm.
their calendar events now. So this summer, then we'll go, but we follow the same line that you do, and so in the same order, that all the internal that goes on, and then the Park and Rec has they have first go at it as well as the YMCA and then and all the nonprofits and then the for profit. I think one of the things that you mentioned is really important is having something in writing because you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble if you start denying certain groups. And so if you have a district policy that says, okay, this is what we do, for instance, thinking of as we enter the political season, right? Are you going to allow political groups to come in and hold events, if you, for instance? And so, and what are some of the groups that you may or may not allow, and what does that policy look like? So you don't get yourself put into a corner. And I think we have a pretty good policy on that. And so, something you might want to think about as you start preparing for this.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, usually, I mean, I should say a well-written facility use policy will have
Hmm.
like a standard is, excuse me, a prioritization
Yeah.
um, kind of rubric built into the policy. And it's obviously going to start with the school district's own extracurriculars first. But then sometimes you'll see things like youth stuff is prioritized over adult use, or local, like truly local, is prioritized over, something that's not quite so local or like regional. So having that built into the policy or as an addendum to the policy, I think it takes a lot of pressure off of the decision makers, the schedulers, because you don't want them having to pick winners and losers. And then there's, you really always want to avoid the perception of favoritism, which is always something that's pointed out by people who don't get what they want, right?
Hmm.
So to the extent that you can have that kind of mapped out ahead of time, you save yourself a lot of headaches.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
really do. But one of the things that too, and maybe this isn't the right way, but right space to talk about it, but we've had other school districts try to reserve our space because they don't have enough gyms.
Yep.
And so that really gets a little dicey, right? So their basketball teams or youth basketball team wants to use our gyms, and heck, we don't have enough space for our own youth basketball teams. So,
Right.
all that plays into it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so when you have a level playing field with large groups like clubs and park and rec, what we've gone to, and I'm not saying this is the way to do it because it's actually kind of messy, but in early August, we almost have like a fantasy football draft for spaces. So we invite the presidents of all of our clubs, basketball, volleyball, softball, every wrestling, all of them, plus the park and rec. And we're unique because we have two municipalities. So we have Muskego and Norway park and rec directors, and we have them all get together in a room and we just start to talk about spaces. I usually use that time to talk about safety procedures and locking doors and stuff, lockdowns and weather ready stuff. But we essentially talk through what our needs are, and we have a whiteboard and they start to talk about schedules at different schools. And usually there's some conflict and some bantering back and forth, but by the end of that meeting, we come to a general consensus for the year, who's going to use this gym, which days, and that's helped. And usually we don't leave the room until we have consensus, because if two people leave the room and put in for a day at the gym that we know we already talked about, we can fall back on that. So it's been instrumental for keeping everybody level-headed. The interesting part is, so when you have club basketball or volleyball, and say your kid didn't make the team and you're the coach, well, guess what? I'm going to go start my new Muskego club and name it something different. So now you got this another player in the mix, and the way we've kind of safeguarded against that is it has to be an athletic director sanctioned club. So that kind of prevents parents from splitting off and creating new clubs, which happens all the time. So you have things like that happening, Joe, where you got to process.
Yeah, we really do. The same thing happens for us, right? And so we really want those clubs to be tied to one of our schools or primarily our two high schools. And so once they split off and so they're not part of an organization,
Mhm.
unless they create one, then really they don't have access to gym space like the others. Again, because we're so tight, just like you are in gym space, it's hard to get at. Yeah. We have some questions I noticed in the chat, and maybe we can address them as we go through. One of them is switching our school's calendar to Arbiter, and any suggestions on a smooth transition. And I want to be very honest here. And so Arbiter brought our schools today, right? And so the transition has not been easy. And so I don't have anything good. We're still dealing with that and trying to work out some of those transitions. And I know they're moving forward with that, but we've had some real issues with that whole process. And I don't know if anybody else has experienced that. But I think the whole state has decided, athletic wise, to go to Arbiter, is what my understanding is. And so hopefully they get some things resolved quickly.
Yeah, we left Arbiter when they were transitioning. We couldn't work in the system, and I understand that a lot of the state's still in there, so I'll be careful about what I say.
Yeah,
Down in our quadrant in Waukesha County, they've decided to leave Arbiter and go to something called Bound. But the speculation is that Bound is going to be purchased by Arbiter because they're a monster organization and they can do that. So it
yeah.
could still fall back on their lap. So we left and we're with a different company. But yeah, it was difficult. And it does make me wonder, like, how does a private organization get a whole state on lock where like you can't leave? It's kind of
I
funny.
know, I know. It's crazy. And because we were looking at other avenues as well, and
Yeah.
just decided because of what's gone along athletic wise that we really didn't have much of a choice. But maybe look at that down the road. But it has not been a smooth transition.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
one thing we have to do, which really stinks, is the athletic department maintained Arbiter so that they could continue to pay their refs through that portal.
yeah,
We moved away, so now we have a staff member doing redundant entries. So essentially, they got to put this stuff in both calendars, and then sometimes
yeah,
they forget to put it in our calendar, and then we have two groups show up at the same time.
yeah.
So it's a little dicey right now, but hopefully it sorts itself out.
Mhm.
A lot
There
of
was a
folks saying, yeah.
I was going to say there's another question is when do you allow groups to start putting in scheduling for the following year? And how do you do that, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I think similar to what we said earlier. I think early August is when we like to, our secretaries don't get in till like August 15th, and I don't want to be like, hey, you're here day one, put in all the stuff for the school year. But usually we want the schools to get their stuff in first. So it's
Hmm.
between August 15th and August 30th is when we get our calendar locked, and then we open it up to everyone else. But that meeting with all the users is critical to establish the framework, like
Yeah.
August 1st for what we're
Hmm.
planning for the year, but they might get bumped depend on what the school needs. How about you?
Yeah, I have on my calendar that triggers me to come March, early April, to go to the principals meetings and start talking about putting their things in. So we prefer to have it done before they leave for summer. But our secretaries, we have one full time all through the summer, so they can do that. And then we don't allow the community members till after July 1st. Still, that's pretty early for some of the schools, and so we run into some conflicts down the road a little bit. But that's what we shoot for: is after July 1st for community members, before July 1st for our schools to put in their time.
Here's a fun one while we're on the topic. What do you do when a staff member maybe has fob access and they're running their own club and maybe you find that they've been running a group every Thursday night?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Um, we have in our policy that a custodian has to be on site anytime that there are students or visitors in the building. And so they would lose access to, if they violate that, they would lose access to the buildings. I know that sounds kind of harsh,
Mhm.
but we really need, when we think in terms of safety, security, and taking care of our buildings, it's important that we have staff there that are part of that and that they follow through the channels. So uh, I won't say it never happens, right? But when we find out about it, we put a stop to it. We don't allow that to happen.
Like,
Hey, yeah, I think it's really important to establish that once an employee is outside of their scope of their job, whether it's like teaching or coaching one of your teams, they have no special rights or privileges. And it's no different than the same person saying, I think I'm going to take the school van for the weekend because I'm moving my kid across
Mhm.
town. Right? That's a personal gain situation, and you're not allowed to do that. And you might say, well, what's the harm? Well, um, all those kids who, all those families that know that they're getting special access, they've got neighbors and connections too. And then all of a sudden you got other people saying, well, why does this team get to go in on Sunday afternoon? Oh, because
mhm.
the guy works there.
Yep.
It's just, it's not that is, you have to be extremely careful about that. And I would argue that being the coach with a fob gives you no special privileges unless you're coaching your team.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
with a
we don't
club
allow
or
individuals to reserve space, and so they have to be an organization to do it,
yeah,
not individuals, because we've gotten requests, for birthday parties and for
right,
different, and so because they're staff members, right? And our
right.
comment is you have to be part of an organization. We don't allow
Right.
individuals to use the space.
Yeah, I had an elementary birthday party where the principal decided to throw his birthday party for his, I think, 7 or 8 year old child and invited, 15 friends or whatever. And they used an elementary gym and used all the fight equipment. They had a heck of a good time one Sunday afternoon. But
Yeah.
then you can imagine what happened when all those parents who were guests, when they called to have
Mhm.
their birthday party at the elementary gym, were told, no, you can't do that. It's just really opening up a can of worms, as they say.
Hey,
Yeah.
Jeremiah, what do you do as when you're starting to schedule as far as holidays go? So how do you work around that piece?
We're a little bit unique for our clubs in Park and Rec, where we have a pretty trusted system where we do issue the group a fob and
Hmm.
allow them to access facilities. So typically, unlike you, we don't have to have a custodian present for all of that
Hmm.
use, which is the bulk of it. If we do
Hmm.
have to have a custodian present, it's $55 an hour for that, plus the
Hmm.
rental fee, which we'll dive into fees in a second.
Yeah.
But how about you? Do you block your holidays?
Yeah, it's twofold. We do both. We block our holidays, specifically Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, Christmas. Um, the holidays we don't block are the spring holidays. And we don't do that only because of spring sports is so limited, right? And time and weather dependent. And so we don't do that. But over the holiday, the winter holidays we do. And so we don't allow practices to occur, even high school practices, in hopes of giving our custodians some time off there. But
Yeah.
we'll work around that too. So that's kind of what we do.
Yeah. One more nuance to that conversation we were just having that's gotten interesting is the the coaches oftentimes won't have an associated club. So we have a lot of feeder programs. And I will say
Yeah.
our programs have gotten really successful because of really good feeder programming that's
Yeah.
aligned to the coaching of the high school. So wrestling, for example, did not have a club. So the coach started a club, he would hold his own practice and then or the official practice. And then afterwards he would have like a club, wrestling club, with younger kids. And so that one was tough to get around. It's like, we want to have this, but like you have to be legit too. So it took some working to get them to put their stuff on the calendar and
Yeah.
get insurance because they were charging for those like practice sessions. And so we're all for, having good feeder programs and making sure that we can compete, but it should still be legit too.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Next topic is fees. So
Mark,
I'll start by saying that
Jeremiah, can I
we
come in one last
oh yeah,
comment?
please. Yeah.
This just goes back a couple of years for me, but um, we had a process whereby you had to fill out all the information that we wanted from you, and you had to sign our agreement, and you had to provide your proof of general liability insurance, and only
Mhm.
then were you given like the code that would allow you to request use of facilities. Like,
Mhm.
because otherwise you give them the use and then you're chasing them for this information.
Yeah.
Best to get it done on the front end when you have all the leverage. Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you're good.
Good point.
So for facility use, it could be tricky. Again, this is one that probably should be your board policy. So it's not just a arbitrary number that we're throwing out there to the community. So every couple years we bring fees. Number one, we do a study, and by we I mean my guy Matt that I talked about earlier. We look at all of Waukesha County. What are folks charging for their schools and spaces? And then we even look at some private facilities. So there's a lot of these monster indoor practice facilities going up. Like, what are they charging for groups to use it? So we're not the cheapest, but we're not the most expensive. So when folks start to complain about fees, we have some data to show, look, we're part of the norm here. A lot of times these groups in Park and Rec will want to say, well, we're taxpayers. Well, yes, but we can't subsidize your event. If we have to turn on the heat and the lights and you're using our toilet paper and our water, why should we be paying for your event? So we'll get into some Fund 80 stuff in a second here, but we establish where we're at for our fees. And essentially what Mike said, one thing that's nice about the platform that we've gone to is when somebody wants to use the facility, they have to put in their insurance information first. And once they start requesting facilities, they get
Mhm.
invoice immediately and they have to say, I agree to pay this for what I've
Mhm.
requested. That's helped us because when we were with our school back in the day, they wouldn't
Mhm.
get anything until they got their bill. And then they get their bill and then they call to dispute it because they didn't know they'd have a custodial charge or whatever it
Yeah.
is. So trying to get all that out there up front right away has been really helpful for us. Any
Yeah.
similarities to what you're doing, Joe, for
Uh,
facility?
Yeah, very similar to what you're doing, because we have run into, right, organizations who didn't pay their bill, they've used it, and then they didn't pay their bill. Our price structure is very similar to what you have right there. One of the things that I would say that we do is if we have a price structure and then if they charge to get into, we double their fee. So
Okay.
if they're making money on what they're doing, and our fees are pretty low, right? When you look at, but they're very similar to your group two fees. And so depending on what the organization is, what they're charging people for, then we'll increase that. That fee will double it. And it says that right in our policy.
One of the trickiest spaces for us is ball diamonds because there's a lot of preparation that goes into
Yeah.
lining a field, opening it up. If there's rain, we may have to cancel. If someone's doing a tournament on a weekend, we may have to have a custodian or our groundskeeper come in and line the fields again and open them and clean the bathrooms. So that tends to add up in our actual costs. So that's one that seems to be a trigger for anybody renting our stuff, but it really is labor intensive for fields.
Yeah, we've run into that too. And then um, we want our people maintaining our fields, right? Because they come in and they kind of trash them or they don't prepare them, especially when you have multiple games, right? So they're not preparing the field like we would want it prepared or maintaining it. And so we've kind of implemented 2 years ago, we implemented that we'll have a grounds person. If they have a tournament, they'll be there. They have to pay for that, right? They'll be there and during that whole day and prep and take care of the field while they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, we went to $500 per field per day for tournaments, which seems expensive, but when you drive by these tournaments, they're from all over the region and parking
Mhm.
lots are full. So it gets pricey. And to your point, we ended up finding our softball field, like infield, just kept growing every year, and we couldn't figure it
Yes.
out. Like it was like, and then we come to find that we watched cameras one weekend. They brought their own equipment out and were
Mm.
dragging the field. So they were dragging
Yeah.
the infield into the out. So monitoring stuff like that's critical too.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we went to what we did. We have to have someone there. We don't want them maintaining our fields. You know, when they use the inside facilities, everything's pretty well taken care of, right? But it seems once you move to the outside, there can be easily be abuse or and not intentional, just not maintaining them the way that we would like. And so that's what we've done there.
And there is revenue to be made. It's not significant. Even seeing these dollars here, you might think like, wow, you're making money hand over fist. But we average 40,000 hours of facility use a year. And over the last 3 years, 3 years ago, we were bringing in about 100 grand a year. This past year, after updating our fees and really getting serious about charging people and not bypassing fees, we got up to 300 grand. But at 40,000 hours, that's still like, I don't know the math. Mike, you're a math guy. It's like $10 an hour, if that.
Easy.
Mhm.
Uh,
We started chatting about different platforms. There probably is even more than here. I just did a quick search. I
Mhm.
know Bound is starting to come up in the state. The chat here is reflecting that. Arbiter has been around as our school prior. There's Brightly, which is formerly School Dude. They have a module. And then Operations Hero they have their module, which is Events HQ. We went to that. And I just encourage anybody going through this, go through an interview process, but always be leery about that like implementation period because I think you see the flashy thing and you're like, I want that. And you think it's going to happen day one, but it takes like a year to really get these things in place. So you don't want to make quick decisions in a vacuum. And also having a point person, I mentioned Matt a couple times already, but I'm just so thankful that he dedicated time to building this out for our district because they don't give you a finished product. They give you someone that'll help you
Mhm.
through something. But really, it's a lot of work. And then you got to get all your people to re-register because you closed your old account. Now you got to get everybody into this new platform and billing system.
yeah, just
Yeah,
if I could jump in just for a second, I think after a long time of doing this, I think I've almost got the formula perfected. I'm working on exactly how they should go, but I think the formula is something like this. Every software application that you introduce into your school district costs, in the end, 3 times more than you thought and takes 3.25 times longer than you thought it would take. I'm
Mhm.
still tweaking the exact formula, but I think I'm close. And don't forget that because yeah, everyone's like, "Oh, this is easy. This is great." And it's never is. Never is.
No, I agree with everything you said, Mike. And then I would say I'd go further a little bit is that make sure your business office is in tune with this too, because of the billing. So they should be involved in any decision making, as well as your athletic director or the people reserving and your IT department. But we don't. I told you early on we're the ones responsible for this, but it goes far beyond us. And I can tell you when we're looking at other systems, even our superintendent was interested in what was happening. And so better off not to make this decision in isolation if it's your department's responsibility.
Question in the chat, good one. Do you charge a group when they are a no-show? If so, do you have a must cancel by clause? For us, we don't have a must cancel by clause. That's a great idea. But we
You know,
do charge because we tell them like you blocked it out, so we couldn't have backfilled and rented it to someone else.
Mhm.
If there's a compelling why, then we would probably honor it. We're not gonna be crazy, but how about you, Joe?
Yeah, most of ours don't get charged, but I can tell you this, if they don't show up, they get a phone call from myself or someone in our department to say, hey, didn't show up last night. What happened? Because, and just sharing with them the importance of when they schedule something, they need to show up because it's taken away from other organizations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit troublesome to me because I
Mm.
feel like we're a school, so we're expected to have grace and
Yeah.
we're taxpayer type thing. But if you were to go to like a athletic facility down the street and schedule out their indoor practice facility for 3 hours and not show up, you better believe they're charging you. And it's going to be 3 times what we would have charged. So
Yes, right.
That's for sure.
here's some other considerations when you're thinking about onboarding one of these products. And there's probably a litany more, but as Joe mentioned, business office, but also involving your tech department. You want to make sure they can integrate it and there's not any holes that are going to be security breaches. Your athletics department, as I mentioned, we have two different systems now and it's not ideal. Requiring insurance certification. I feel like this is a great CYA, and potentially if your program can track when it expires, that's huge because just because someone entered in 2025 with this insurance certificate
Yeah.
doesn't mean in 2028 they still have coverage.
That's exactly
Uh,
right.
I appreciate the accurate estimates, making sure that they know what they're going to pay ahead of time.
Mhm.
Having an open calendar view, so you don't want to just like allow people to request everything and then you're denying 90% of it because it's booked. They should be able to see what's available or pending so that they're not going through all this rework of requesting stuff. Easy invoicing and invoice tracking, even. So if you can see where your revenues are to date, that's helpful. See who's past due, 90 days past due, 30 days past due. Scout groups are notorious for not paying. So just keeping track of those things. And then is there a way for you to block someone that's chosen not to pay their bills for 90 days, six months, you know? I think that that should be some decent leverage to say you're now blocked. You can't rent until we're paid up. Then lastly would be integration to your work order system. Can it track the needs for that group? Are they requesting a setup or scoreboards or things that require your custodial crew to follow through with something? That's helpful too, so it's not disjointed with your normal process.
Yeah. We have had issues, right, where somebody hasn't paid, and so we do block them from using the facility in the future. But kind of that goes along with that. One of the things that I do is I have a report that I have to give the board every year on building use, and one of them is misuse of facilities. And so, several years ago, 3 years ago now, we had to um, disbar a adult organization that was using our facilities. And our policy says that we have the ability to do that, but we had good documentation on that. And so they can't use our facilities anymore because of some violations that occurred. But I will tell you, it became a little political, right? They contacted board members, they contacted, and so I was able to document the misuse of facilities and what transpired, and it has been not been an issue since then. And but unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but those things do come up. And again, as stewards of our facilities, we certainly don't want our adults doing things that we wouldn't allow our students to do in our facilities.
Great point.
This is kind of a sample, Joe, like a beginning end, and I'm sure your platform has this too. You
Yeah.
get somebody or an event that comes through the progression of acceptance. So we have the approvers on the right from
Mhm.
the school, from me all the way to the school. Um, just and this comes to your inbox too. So it's not like you have to go into a program to, sort through what's happening. We're getting daily things for requests to use different facilities and I'm not the only stopgap there. There's several other people just to make sure that we're covered.
Yeah, that's exactly the way we work too.
Yeah. Let's talk about how much it costs to run a facility. So for those groups that are like, hey, we should get it for free. We're a taxpayer. This is a what we call a dent meter. I think there's a really good sponsor of WASBO, the Data Wrangler program. We
Mhm.
utilize them, and they essentially can install a meter on your school that can monitor your energy use real time and give you data about, peaks and demands and stuff. So what you're looking at here is, our 5 days a week at our high school, and you can see the weekends. So on February 15th is a great weekend when we don't have a lot going on. But you look at like February 8th and February 22nd, you can see that on a weekend when somebody's in using something for a tournament, that it's costing us real money. Our high school electric bill per month is about $40,000. So helping to try to, you know, prove to folks this isn't just a shot in the dark. We have real expenses that are coming through for this.
Yeah, that's a great tool. We don't do that, but that's a great tool, Jeremiah.
Yeah.
But
I
you do
think
leverage Fund 80, so talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. So this is part of the report that I give the board every year. And so this is a sample of one. We monitor everything that happens outside the normal school day and the different groups that use our facilities. So, and below you would see these are the main groups that use our facilities, but there's other groups that do too, and we would name them by name. And so one of the things that we do is we use Fund 80 for that. And so when it comes to the Boys and Girls Club, Park and Rec, and the YMCA, and our own youth programs, we use Fund 80. So we in Fund 80, we last year we did 133,000 in Fund 80 for those use, so we can reduce the cost for people who are using them, especially the nonprofits. In revenue, we only made about $30,000. And so when you look at the two, we bring in about $160,000 to help support the overtime and everything that goes into the process. And so this report we give every year, we compare it year to year, we talk about those things, and we kind of set parameters for the board. But Fund 80 is a big part of it. Our community, our school board, as well as our superintendent, have said we want our facilities used. We want them to be used as often as possible with as little cost as possible. And so the Fund 80 has really worked well for us.
Yeah.
How about you,
Yeah.
Jeremiah?
We don't, I kind of wish we did, but we can. I think the thing is, if you're going to levy, it's still going to impact the taxpayers. So
Yeah,
I think we're in a very conservative community and we
yeah,
just make do. But yes, I agree. There's opportunity. And if you can prove it through either metering or this charts that you have, I think that's the critical part that DPI would require for you to do this.
yeah,
hey, if
yeah.
anybody wants to jump on the chat, if there's a utility monitoring company that you do business with, other than who did you mention, Jeremiah?
Data Wrangler?
Data Wrangle, yeah. If there are others that you find are helpful and useful, please put them in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A great question just came through, and this is more about like safety and security. If you're going to allow folks to use your buildings, making sure that people aren't wandering the building and that they're staying in the space they were supposed to be. We had a nightmare story where somebody through Park and Rec left a door propped open, which is very common,
Mhm.
and a vagrant, wandered into the building and slept in the bathroom overnight and was found in the bathroom the next morning. So you never know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Also for security, be careful with security. So we have an open swim program. We have a lifeguard that staffs it. The lifeguard locked up the locker rooms, and later that night, a wife and daughter were missing, and a guy had been watching the Packer game all day, and he called the police to report his wife missing at like 10:30 p.m. and she was locked into the locker room. So careful with lockup procedures as well.
Oh.
yeah. I'll just add the question from Gage to everyone is yes, I think all of us have those issues, right? Where someone uses a facility and they have kids running around, and so we've tried to reduce that as much as possible, pulling gates, doing those types of things. But when we see a misuse, and I use that loosely, when we see that happening, we'll talk to whoever the organization is. We'll have a conversation with them and say, hey, you need to get a better handle on what's happening here. But even at that, it happens periodically. One thing I will tell you is for us, and I'll advocate for this all along, is, and I said it earlier, we have a custodian there whenever it's being used. And so we can secure the building, know everything's being done when it leaves. And so that's really important to us to have that done. It's a burden, though. I will say you have a lot of overtime hours for custodians, and during the winter months, especially, it can burn them out a little bit.
We answered a lot of these questions, frequently asked questions. One that we didn't is, do you allow donations to offset rental costs? So a few years ago, it was like we were having some organizations donating some substantial funds for scoreboards or stadiums, turf. And so we thought that that would be a nice way to say, you know what, we're going to defer your rental charges for a period where we still make money. And it's not like they get the full deference, but they get something. But then it got a little wonky with some clubs like, oh, we bought all the team's t-shirts, or we paid for a coaching clinic, or we're getting a popcorn machine for the concession stand. And so we're actually putting an end to this unless there's a special circumstance like a field turf donation or something. But we found it got out of hand a little bit. Do you guys defer anything for donations?
Yeah, only once have we done that. And so WWTC's baseball program uses Logan High School. And so in our purchase agreement, whenever we do any major facility improvement, and this year we're putting in new dugouts for our varsity baseball, they pay 1/3 of the cost. And so when that happens, yes, there will be no rental fee for that year, but we're also sharing, those are significant dollars, right, to build two dugouts, visitor and home. And that seems to have worked really well for us, but that's the only incident and really specific to a specific sport in mind and a specific organization, a Western Technical College.
Yeah. Yeah, we've a lot we were really grateful because our youth football program gave like 100,000 for our stadium, and then our youth basketball program put in a wood court at one of our middle schools. So those seem to be like, you know what, we should think about this, but I'd also caution there's some negotiating there if you're going to do this, because
Mhm.
you should
Yeah.
run the fees based upon your historical data with these groups to be like, if we didn't do this, what would they have paid otherwise? Because the basketball group was like, all right, we want 5 years. And I'm like, well, in that end, we should put in the court and you can give us 200 grand. So
That's
make
not a
sure,
donation anymore.
yeah,
That's a business transaction.
yes, yes, exactly. We already talked about timing and how we enter things. Tracking, Joe, you had a nice board presentation document. Tim by me does a great job of tracking this because I think the old perception of custodial work is you're just cleaning and that's it. But we
Mhm.
have work orders, we have snow removal, and the increasing use of us becoming a rec complex, we have real hours associated with these groups. So when overtime starts to trickle in and the business manager is saying, like, why is there so much overtime? Well, we can share that, most of it is related to all these groups and the usage that's happening. So finding a way to track that, I think, is critical. This is just 1 month for us, 722 permits issued through our program. So there's a lot happening in our schools. And if we were privatized, this would be like a full-time job just for somebody managing these type of things.
Yeah.
Right. I think business managers see overtime and assume that that means like poor planning
Yeah.
or whatever. Got to spend some time with your business office educating them on some of these concepts.
Yeah, we work very closely with our business office and it's documented, as on their time sheets, it's documented very clearly what they're in there for. If the custodians don't do that, we deny it and send it back to them and say, you need to document everything.
Right.
Question in the chat, how do you get notified if a group uses a different space than they were approved to use? I think the thing that I've encouraged my building leads to do is you can technically you get in on Monday and you see some things out of sort is just to review camera footage to see if like maybe there was like somebody will request a practice for a gym and then you see they showed up with 500 people, the parking lot was full. That warrants a conversation. Like you didn't really inform
Mhm.
us of what you were going to be using and doing. And you find that it's not just the gym. Well, now you've used the cafeteria. And now the cafeteria bathrooms have been used. So it's a bit nuanced. And I think just keeping a short leash on groups that are using the facility.
Yeah. And we have a custodian on staff, so they notify us Monday morning exactly what happened.
Here's kind of a tracking. So trying to tell your story, as we've shared earlier, like what was your revenues year to year from facility use? Your business manager should probably be able to pull that out for you. And then just even how much, the board may want to know who's using your facility. So for us, this was our like quarterly report to the board back in like October. We already had 3,400 events. Half of those were art school events, half of them were outside groups. So that's good to share too if we're talking that thing. And the amount that have been declined or confirmed, like for the most part, we affirm everybody that tries to get in here.
Yep.
All right. Anything that we didn't cover that you're thinking about, Joe?
No, I think
I've got one
hopefully
for
we
you.
answered everybody's questions. I maybe we can share a couple things that have happened. Maybe you can share a story, that unique story that's happened with your building use, Jeremiah.
Oof. I mentioned this if anybody was at the WASBO thing a couple years ago where we did the keynote. We had a guy, we have a youth football group that uses our stadium all of Saturday, so we have staffing there. Well, someone didn't latch the press box, and so the press box remained open for the entire weekend. And when football got in the following Friday, there was like popcorn everywhere. The equipment was fiddled with and we couldn't figure it out, but we ended up going back and looking at footage. And after the stadium cleared out, a vagrant pulled in on his bike and went into the press box and ended up sleeping in the press box for the entire weekend. And he would go to the Quick Trip, I think, based upon evidence, buy popcorn. He ended up logging into the computer in there and using his personal Gmail to do so. And we found out that he had just the week before applied to be a safety aide at our high school. So we were able to
Oh,
connect the dots.
yeah.
But we coined him the press box pisser because on the quarterly hour he would step outside and pee over the edge of
Oh,
the
God.
stadium. So yes,
At least he peed
Hey,
over the edge, right?
yes, yes.
that's
I
how
think, Mike, you had a comment.
first of all, I think it's a great slide deck and a really good conversation.
Mhm.
I wanted to mention, like I said, everyone's got a story. I'll give you mine. When the adult basketball league basketball game goes into overtime and they expect the group that's following to sit there and wait while they finish their game.
Oh yeah, yep.
And then now the youth coach is fighting with the adult guy and yeah, so hey, your time is your time, right? We don't care if you've got overtime, right? You've got to be out of there.
Yeah,
That's just how it works.
yeah.
But I also want to say that in a situation like that, it's not really fair to expect a custodian who maybe doesn't have a lot of training in this to go in and be a diplomat and negotiate a settlement and deal
Mhm.
with people whose blood is up, and they're yelling
Mhm.
and screaming. So my plea is that if you have for your second shift custodians, see what you could do about giving them some professional development around how to deal with people like this and like what the rules are and how do you handle it and when do you back away and say I'm calling the police, right? That
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's a lot to ask of somebody who's not ready for that kind of confrontation.
And I think
Mhm.
Yeah.
that plays really well into one of the questions we have in the chat. Ron asked, what do folks do for safety for these events and these outside groups? Is there like a protocol that those nighttime custodians have to follow? Or like, what are you guys doing to ensure that your safety protocol is followed?
Well, typically we would have one entrance in and out of the facility, and
Mm,
and we try to close off the rest of the facility as much as possible. Not always easy, right? So, um, our custodians also know they will never ever be second guessed if they have to call the police department. My phone is always available and the managers, but they will never be second guessed. When in doubt, do it. And if it's not needed, we'll deal with that later. But they they always have that ability to do that, and we will never question their authority.
Ours is related to weather, so similar to what was already shared. And we have weather alerts, and we ask that all of our club presidents sign up for the weather alerts. One of the worst things is we have green space that gets used, to another question here, by our youth football programs at several of our schools. And a lot of times parents are scheduled to pick up at, say, 6 p.m. Well, there's a weather event rolling in at 5:30, and they just want to practice through it. There's lightning. And then the coaches, who are all volunteers, want to get out of there as soon as the practice ends. And then there's parents that are late to pick up their kids. So you got these
Mhm.
kids waiting outside in a storm. So thinking through those processes and mandating that we will cancel your guys' usage if you don't follow our weather procedures. So here's the
Right.
notification. here's a fob to the building if there's an emergency. And we have our custodians, at least on the night shift, trained that if there's activities happening outside, run out there and let them know, either leave or get in the building, one or the other. You can wait in your car, but you can't continue to play outside in the lightning.
Mhm. Another question came through. Do you require insurance from groups that are invited in by the school? Like they're not making their own reservation, but the school invited them?
I don't know.
Typically, we would not. Because we wouldn't be involved. We typically wouldn't know if they've invited them in. Yeah, I'm assuming that meant school day, but
But after the school day, then probably, yeah, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Last question I see is Gage, how do you prevent groups from using outdoor green space? I'd say that one's a little bit more difficult. We're kind of like public parks. If we found a group, we'll say lacrosse maybe, they've been going to different schools, and what happens is lacrosse is incredibly hard on grass. And so if you're not in a dedicated sports space and you're just using a green space, it's much like your yard. And imagine having 300 people show up to your yard and trample it. The evidence gets quick, it starts to puddle. So just, I would notify them that we want to provide you the best surface possible. We're going to need to work together on this. And our green spaces are rented spaces. And if you're gonna want to appreciate the surface, like let's work on an investment together to make sure that it's good. And that conversation might have happened last week. So
how do you guys handle sales tax for groups if they don't provide a tax exempt number? Do you charge sales tax?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
no.
Does your AD have any input into gym usage? If so, do they have a say in the requests? Yes, our AD does for sure.
Yes,
Mike?
ours does too.
I found in my case that often I had trouble with the AD, who was just blocking out enormous amounts of time just in case one of the teams might ever need to use the facility. Like it was hogging the resource. And I had to like push back on that and be like, come on, man, the school board is trying to keep these facilities open for the community. And so there was often my most difficult conversations were with the internal users, not the externals.
No, I would agree. And so I have overrode the AD on things. If he'll say no to a community use, and then they'll call us, and then I'll have a conversation with him and why, and they'll say that's not acceptable. We're going to allow them to use our facility. It doesn't happen very often, but it has happened. More likely than not, it's the AD adding things and not putting them on the calendar that causes a bigger problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one AD who thought that, that our football field was like Lambeau or something. And it was like, nobody can ever use our varsity football field.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, you're like 2-5 this year. And Lord knows your team's not using the end zone because you haven't been in there in 4 years. So, come on, lighten up a little bit. And those are tough conversations sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like the
To
Bears.
play,
Sounds like the
To play-
Bears.
yes.
You,
You mean
Caitlin?
the NFC North champion Bears? Are you talking
Yes.
about?
That's right.
Talking about the, are you talking about
Yes.
the Indiana Bears?
We probably should we should probably end it on that note.
Yes, yes. Uh-oh, the chat's gonna go nuts. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we're reached the end here. As always, please check the WASBA website for upcoming events. I know we got we have spring conference, summer custodial conferences coming up. So please lock in. Muskego is a host site this year, so we're happy to open our doors to everybody that's going to join. And we have upcoming topic TBD, to be determined. So it'll be a variety week. So we'll see what we got in the hopper for our next session.
Well, we better
Landscaping.
not be talking about snow plowing.
Yeah.
We're talking about landscaping actually next time.
That's good. That's optimistic. I love it.
Yes.
Well,
Have a
thanks
great
everybody
day,
for joining.
everybody.
Great
Yep.
job, guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, right on.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.